Hey Ange, have you got a video on your profile? We are recording live now. So just for that question, in case you've just joined us through the live broadcast or you're watching this as a replay, the question was, the average small business person, they've got maybe a team of 1 to 5 people and they are looking at their cash flow and they're thinking, well, I don't think I'm going to be able to bring them any more. I might be able to maintain what we have. What are my rights and what are my responsibilities here as an employer? From a legal perspective, Ange, why don't you tell us a little bit about that and where we're at right now?
So Beck, that's a scenario that I've really been advising on a lot in the last few days. So businesses who are concerned about finding out what their particular options might be going forward. So they want to have an idea of what options are going to be available for them so that they can be a little bit more forearmed and forewarned before they have to implement things. So there's a lot of confusion out there, particularly in relation to what a stand down is and when you can stand down employees, and perhaps what other options you should be looking at before you get to that stage. There's also a lot of confusion about people thinking that they can automatically change people's hours or automatically reduce people's hours or force employees to take annual leave as well. So all of those things come into play when you're looking at, well, where are we sitting right now and what can we do? A couple of the quick answers from the first start of the consideration, I guess, is if you're looking at, well, maybe I need to change hours or reduce hours, from that perspective, an employer does not have an automatic right just to be able to go and do that. So that needs to be generally done with the agreement of the employee. But most importantly, you need to go back and check what instruments govern your employment relationships. So if there's an award that applies,
you're going to make this really simple for people. So what you're saying is that if you've got an employer, an employee or employees right now as full-time or part-time, because casual you can just change and ebb anyway and flow with that, can't you? But if you've got a part-time and a full-time employee, you cannot just cut their hours back. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And you need to have regard, first of all, to whether there might be an award that covers them. So if there's an award that covers the employee, then there are consultation provisions within that award usually that deal with changes to rosters and changes to workplace arrangements. So you need to go there and have a look at what that is. But as a general rule, you'll need to consult. They'll need to look at their award. So they'll need to go to their award.
Government site for that?
The award can be found either on the Fair Work Commission website or the Fair Work
Ombudsman.
Either the Fair Work Ombudsman website or the Fair Work Commission website. It's on both.
Okay, I'm just tapping that in now into the Facebook group so that people can know the words to search. Okay, through the Fair Work Commission or the Fair Work Ombudsman website. But you're saying people generally would need to consult, Ange.
Yeah, so you can't usually just make a change, one that you as a business owner decides, I can't have you working full-time anymore, I need to cut your hours to 20 hours a week. Ordinarily, you can't do that. You'll need to consult with employees about it, you'll need to get agreement from them. So that's the first thing to do, is to consult with your employees and see if by way of an agreed position, people agree to make changes to try and have their employment continue. The second thing is, in looking at that, is whether employees will perhaps utilise some of their annual leave. Again, there's only limited circumstances where an employer can direct an employee to take leave, and they are dealt with in the award. If the employee is not covered by the award, then they are dealt with in the Fair Work Act. But most employees covered by an award has got that ability to direct them to take leave. But the problem is that it's not really designed for these circumstances. So most of the award provisions will say the employee has to have accrued 8 weeks leave before you can give them a direction. Usually that direction must leave them with 6 weeks leave, and you've got to give them 8 weeks notice. So in those circumstances, if we're looking at something right now and employers are wanting to direct employees to take leave in the next little while, giving them 8 weeks notice is not really going to be helpful for them. So again, it's a matter of going back, talking to the employees and seeing whether they will agree to take leave as opposed to being subject to a direction to take it. So that's just another practical way of dealing with it.
what I'm hearing now is, Ange, that potentially the government and the situation is not set up to encounter an arena like this, because most people are hearing 8 weeks and 6 weeks leave. That would mean that people would have taken any of their leave for a couple of years, which means that they probably, most cases and most scenarios, that wouldn't be the case in the workplace. Is that what you see, Beverly, as well? Like, people wouldn't have 14 weeks or 22 weeks of leave up their sleeve.
Absolutely, and particularly in small business, at the end of the day, most people do like to take their leave to have rest breaks and have a bit of a recharge. So I think that, definitely in most cases that's not the case. And that, I guess it's risky and it's a difficult thing to navigate. And Angela, maybe to play devil's advocate here, so what if an employee then comes back and says, no, I don't want to negotiate hours. I need these wages. I need to work these hours. What are you going to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I've been talking to clients about, is it very well could be the case that the employee says, no, I need to keep my hours what they are, and no, I don't want to use my leave because I want to save it up when I can actually have a holiday. In those circumstances, you'll then have to look at whether the business is in a position to qualify to be able to implement a stand down, or whether redundancy might have to be the pathway that they'll go down. The other thing, when you're trying to negotiate first up with the employees, it's really a matter of how you're discussing it.
Just stop back there for a second and we'll come back to redundancies in a minute. I just want to make sure, if you are watching this online inside of the Business Lead Connection Hub, make sure that you'll drop any questions that are coming up for you. Just tap them into the comments section of that. I've got that open. I can see what you are doing, and if you're just jumping on and joining us, please say hi, perhaps send some love or like a thumbs up so that we know that you're here. And we know that you're tuning in. This is valuable information for you. So far, I'm getting increasing great knowledge from this about where we stand as employers, and certainly what our options are. And what I'm seeing and hearing is that from a legal perspective, they're pretty tight for us all, which I can feel that, the responsibility of being an employer right now could be weighing heavily on people. So you did mention about, if Beverly you asked a great question, Beverly, about what if the person says, no, I'm not willing to take any of my leave. What do I do? And you started to say, well, that's a path that we may have to look at, taking redundancies or standing down for people. I want to keep going down that path because I think it's really important to continue the story on from where we are. So if an employee does say, no, not willing to do that, what happens then?
Okay. So the first thing to consider is whether the business could stand down an employee. The benefit of a stand down over a redundancy from a business point of view is that you're not having to terminate the employee, so they'll remain employed by you, and then when the business is up and running again, they will just recommence work. Secondly, you're not having to pay out all of their accrued entitlements, and if they're entitled to redundancy payment, then you're not having to pay that out either in a stand down situation. So from a cost point of view, it may be more cost effective, and cash flow issues will obviously be arising during this time, to utilise the stand down provision if you can, rather than utilising redundancies. Okay, let's deal with what a stand down is.
That's a great question. Exactly, it was going to be mine next, Anne. What is a stand down?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, I'll just need to say, look, the question of being able to stand down an employee is really fact dependent, and you need to exercise extreme caution. Some of the cases will be fairly clear cut, and I'll touch on those, but essentially there needs to be a stoppage of work. The employee to be stood down cannot be usefully employed. And then thirdly, the cause of the stoppage of work must be one that the employer can't reasonably be held responsible for. When the stand down happens, the employee is stood down without pay. If you get it wrong and you weren't entitled to stand an employee down, you'll need to pay them for that period.
Can we just
during the period of it?
Sorry, Angela, can we just
give an example?
Practical example of that? Yeah,
I will. Yeah, an example.
Reasonably held responsible for the situation in which they found themselves would apply to this particular arena.
So how that would apply is with the COVID-19, for example, if there's a government directive that your business must close. So a whole heap of businesses are currently subject to that. if the government directive comes out and said all licensed premises, gyms, blah, 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 has to close like it did, if your business needed to close, there was a stoppage of work for which you cannot be reasonably held responsible. If you cannot usefully employ those employees, then they can be stood down. However, it's not limited to looking at the work that they usually perform. If they can perform other work and be usefully employed in other work in the business, then those employees would not be stood down. And secondly, the whole business does not have to be stood down. So there can be separate departments where one lot of employees within one department might be stood down and another might not be. Another example would be perhaps not necessarily if the whole business is closed, but because of some of the restrictions that have been implemented. You're subject to a government directive for those restrictions. So they're the ones that are fairly black and white. If you're subject to a government directive that means that your business can't do that work and therefore there's a stoppage of work, then you'll be able to utilise those stand down provisions. Or, for example, if you make something and you're dependent upon supplies coming in to be able to make that thing. If you can't get those supplies because of COVID-19, then again, that will be a situation where it's outside your control and there's a stoppage of work because you can't continue to make that particular product or whatever it might be. And again, that will be where you can utilise the stand down provisions directly. Where it gets more grey and messy is where there's just been a downturn in business.
All right.
So if your business is just suffering a downturn.
Let's deal with the first part. So I would imagine that most bricks and mortar businesses right now are in that first category where they can't be operating. So as in like printers, perhaps, if you're listening in, or builders, or any tradespeople, anyone that has a shop frontage, for example, I would imagine they would class as someone who in that first area of jurisdiction. Is that correct?
Yeah, so first of all, you'd have to look at whether they could do things like work from home, perhaps, because a lot of businesses, although they may have to close their shop or their actual, business premises, they may be able to still work from home. So therefore, in those circumstances, they can still be usefully employed. The first port of call is, can they be usefully employed in some other way? Can they be working from home? Can they do other work which they wouldn't normally perform? If any of those things apply, then you would not get to a situation of a stand down because there doesn't have to be an actual stoppage of work. And it will get complex on a business by business basis, and it will be very factually dependent. But the sort of general example, if you're going to be subject to a government directive of some sort that means you have to stop that bit of work, or you're reliant upon supplies or parts or something from someone else, and you're not able to get that to continue on with the work that you're doing, or even if you have one part of your business affected, for example, somebody tests positive to COVID-19, and that part of your business must cease because all of those employees must go into self-isolation or quarantine. So that could also be a situation where all of those factors could affect another part of your business, and therefore there might have to be a stand down because of the flow-on effect of that. So that's why I'm saying it's quite difficult to be specific.
That's the whole point of today. We want to make sure that it doesn't have to be complex. And I'm taking out a lot of non-complex stuff out of this too. We're trying to make it what the legal terms, we're wanting to put them into. That's what, Beverly's role is, and my role is to try and take what this complex scenario is in legal language and put it into something that's useful. And I think we're doing that so far. So just drop us a little comment if this has been for you so far, and what's the most helpful part for you. So I'd love to hear your comments inside of the Connection Hub as you're watching this. What's the most helpful and useful part of this so far for you? Also, this is your chance to get your specific questions about your business answered. So don't hold back. Don't worry about being the first person to ask a question. Don't worry if you get asking too many questions. If you are asking too many questions, I'll let you know and I'll say, no worries. Why don't you follow up one of these ladies after that? But as a serial question asker myself, I don't think you can ever be too many questions. So fire those away. But I do want to hear what's the most useful and important thing that you've heard so far. Okay, so Angela.
Can I just say, Beck?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say that the two questions that have been arising out of the question of stand down mostly have been, well, if I'm only standing them down, can they access the income support payments from the government? because employers are concerned that if they're only standing them down and not terminating them, that the employees may not be able to access those income support payments. So the answer to that is yes. If the employee is stood down, they still are able to access the income support payments being provided by the government. And the second part that I've been asked is, can they go and get another job during that period? Yes, they can do that. Obviously, when you're back up and running, they need to make themselves available to be able to come back to work, but it does not prevent them from going and getting another job. And then thirdly, although they are stood down, they will continue to accrue their entitlements during that period of stand down. So they will accrue their personal leave and they will accrue their annual leave across that period.
Right.
So they're the three other issues that have been cropping up for employers where they're wanting to know what happens in a stand down situation. Obviously, an employee can ask to take their annual leave during a stand down as well, and you can agree to them doing that. Something that's a little more creative that we're finding that employers are trying to do is have a discussion with the employees and say, look, we don't want to get to a stand down or a redundancy situation, so let's see if we can all come together and make some agreement or arrangement, even temporarily, and we'll review it in a couple of weeks. What if we all reduce our hours to X point and take X annual leave? So maybe we agree to reduce our hours to 3 days a week and we take 1 day a week annual leave and 1 day leave without pay. Things like that, just trying to be a bit more creative.
Beverly, we were talking about that earlier as well and having that conversation. So I want to open up the doors to you right now. We were discussing, there are some things that that people could be doing during this time. What are you seeing in terms of how we can go about either making the most of the staff that we have in perhaps a downturn period for our work, if we don't feel like we have the legal rights? How do we even open the doors to having these transparent conversations with our staff?
Mm-hmm. I think that's something that Angela just touched on there, which is really important to talk about, is being open and transparent with your staff. For me as a HR advisor and a HR consultant, it's all about communication with your teams and making sure that you're actually talking to them about what's going on, being really transparent with them, let them know the situation of the business. If you feel as though there are other things within the business that they can contribute to that you're even not sure they might have the skill set to do, have those conversations with them. They might be willing to put up their hand and say, okay, understand, I don't want to lose my job and I'm happy to reduce my hours from 38 hours a week down to, 10 hours or 20 hours a week if you can possibly accommodate me doing that, and I'm willing to work from home. Obviously, different businesses, like we were talking about before, there's your bricks and mortar businesses, they're your trades businesses that all have different requirements, and they're practically, you really do have to consider what they could do from home. You're not necessarily going to get your landscape gardener to go home and write blogs, unless, of course, they're good at writing and you can get them to do that and they've got good topical subjects they could talk about. So having those open conversations is really important.
And I think that we've that through the Business League members and as well, haven't we, inside of our community, Beverly, that one of the key things in this is, using this, first one, it's leaning into your community and making sure that you've got people like this surrounding you. But the second thing is using this as a stress test for your business. Yes, it's a sucky one, and yes, it could be, financially difficult time, but it's a difficult time for everyone.
Absolutely.
And using this as a stress test to find out what are the other skills that our employees might actually have that we aren't we're underutilizing or not using at all.
Yeah, and as a business owner, I think it's important not to panic right now. It's a stressful situation, yes, but have a think about the future of where your business is going to be when we come through all of this, and try to plan for that. Utilize your staff if you can. If you have the cash flow right now and the ability to continue to pay your staff, utilize them to the best of your ability. I've got a whole list of things that I could suggest for you to get people to do from home. For example, reviewing and rejigging your business processes, have a look at your policies and procedures, have a look at how you can adjust them, rewrite them, get your staff to brainstorm on those sorts of things, have a look at your vision, values and mission statements, get everyone in the room, have a conversation about that. You could, if you've got products, you can take product photos and start getting some Facebook posts or marketing materials together for future use. Again, writing blogs or newsletters, articles, materials that you can use in future that some of us don't have time to do normally because our business is so busy. looking at reducing your operating costs by, you know, not using the photocopier or printing during this time. If you don't have to, don't do it.
The only issue I think is your kids at home, Beverly, and there are kids who need printing, colour by numbers, tracing of letters and numerals, and all the things that I've just spent hundreds of pages printing out for my kids at home. But yes, they are good, you know, nice, great ideas. And perhaps, Beverly, you could put a list together and we could drop it inside the Connection Hub underneath this video for people who couldn't make it today and want to come back and do the replay. Now, I do have a question here from someone who is watching inside of the Connection Hub right now. It was from Rafaela. Hello, Rafaela. Her question was, and this may be one for you, Ange. In New South Wales, the construction sites are exempt of closing down. Is this the same for Queensland?
Currently, there is no direction in place for construction sites in Queensland. We obviously will wait and see what happens when the next stages of perhaps closures come through, and I have a number of clients that are anxiously awaiting the outcome of the border closure, and this will probably affect a number of our members as well, where they perhaps work on one side of the border and live on the other. And I've just been told by a colleague that there's going to be a press conference at 11:30 to announce more to do with what those specifics are going to do. So obviously with the whole Tweed area, they can't just say you've got to stay on one side. There's going to have to be some exemptions or some specific particulars implemented around that, and we believe that's what they've been deliberating overnight. So that press conference at 11:30 should have more details of that, and that's obviously going to affect a lot of people, including the trades, because a lot of people travel backwards and forwards to do that sort of work and to do construction work. And for example, I've got a client who's got staff down in New South Wales at the moment. They're a business on the Gold Coast. Staff are in New South Wales. He needs to make a decision as to whether he's going to pull those staff and bring them home, because if they have to serve the 14-day isolation period when they come home, he's essentially going to be up for 10 weeks' wages for staff doing nothing, and that's a significant cost to him and his business. So knowing what these new restrictions are going to be will be really important for businesses making decisions about those sorts of things and whether they'll even be able to operate across the border.
Absolutely, and I think things are changing very quickly, and the information that we are certainly giving here is certainly just information. If you do need something legal and you feel that it's a legal requirement, you do know who to turn to. Look for someone in the HR consultancy world, either into Aiken Legal HR or into Beverly Russell. They'll be able to support you. But here inside the Business League Connection Hub, if you have a buddy in business and they aren't part of this group, invite them in, because now's the time. We're going to be running these masterclasses. As new information becomes available, we're going to have the conversations. We're going to turn the stuff that's important to you guys and that, you know, is actually necessary for us as business operators into conversations like this as much as we can to get your questions answered and give you information that can be used and taken back and used into your workplace. If you haven't known, if you don't know already, today we are running one at 2 o'clock today, also similar to this, where we'll be talking about unpacking the stimulus package and what it means for you. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, ladies, and we will finish off here, unless if you want a question asked, then let's get onto that now. Otherwise, we're going to start finishing up in a few moments. The other one I want you to put in your diary is next Wednesday, the 1st of April. We will be running our usual breakfast event, but we will be taking it online. I'm very excited. It's going to be lessons from Adapt or Die, lessons from a war zone. Former retired Army Major Edward Plant is going to be talking about his experiences living in Iraq through war and how he still managed to build a city and build economy for the locals in that as he was under literal fire and faced with death. I think it's a very important message for those of us right now who are feeling fearful but still have a job to get on and do. We'll be putting details of how to join that breakfast inside the Connection Hub and onside the Business League page as well. So finish up here. One question. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, we didn't get to speak about redundancies, and we don't have time, but if I can just caution people, if they do need to end up in a redundancy situation, again, you can't just go ahead and make people redundant. There's a process that has to be followed. There's consultation that has to be undertaken. And if you fail to do that, you can end up with a claim. So seek some more specific advice about that if you get to that, or maybe we'll get to chat about that a bit further at another time.
Yeah, I think let's find out, wait another few days. Maybe we can touch in once we've got some new information. In the meantime, Angela, I know you're very active in posting things inside the Connection Hub as well, and inside to our members lounge, specifically just for our members. And we're doing a number of different initiatives over there as well, for helping people stay abreast of this information. I'm going to get Ange and Bev, you guys to drop in, and underneath this video inside the Connection Hub, drop your websites so people can access more information specifically to you. Redundancies, I think at the moment we're saying stay away from them as long as you can, but if you need to take them, seek advice and don't just do that. Stand down looks like it's the option for most people at the moment, and again, if you're not sure, seek advice. And Ange, I think there's probably, for those people who are concerned about a cost of these things, there are free things that people could get advice from as well, couldn't they, from a legal perspective?
I'm not aware of any free legal service available to employers, and most of the employer organisations, where if you're a member of them, are actually specifically saying if it's too complex, you're going to have to get specific advice because it's so fact dependent. If you're subject to just a government directive that's much more straightforward, then that's easy. But when it gets to those grayer areas, they themselves are saying seek specific legal advice because there's so many variables and so fact dependent on the circumstances. But look, as we do our updates, as we do our alerts and we send them out, I will post them into the members lounge so that people can see those. Separately to that, they can subscribe to our newsletter as well, which is where the updates will also be going out to. So if they don't want to miss them, I have tried to put them in the members lounge before, and I think one of them might have got flicked back. So I will continue to attempt to put those in the members lounge.
So the Connection Hub's a really great place, which is where we're going live through now, Angela. That's not just members of the Business League. We are extending our reach right now for these masterclasses to anyone who's in small business right now, because this is the way that in times of crisis, we all need to dig in and give as much and as generously as we can. So this is the way that the Business League can help you. The community is here, ready to give. There are so many specialised people inside of this community that all have, inside of our members lounge, so much feedback saying, let me help, I'm happy to help. Even if it's not my area, happy to be a soundboard. So let this community be your community through crisis. Beverly, do you have any messages to finish off with?
Yeah, thanks, Beck. I obviously consult is probably the big message here. Talk to your staff, be open, transparent, have those conversations with them. I'm happy to open up my Facebook page for questions and answers and even phone calls from businesses that want to chew the fat for free. I'm happy to have those conversations with you. If I believe that you need specific legal advice, then I will say that. But as far as my knowledge in this area, I've done all the research and I understand what's going on as well. So happy for anyone to give me a call or to connect in some way to have a chat if you feel you need to.
So let's keep the Connection Hub. If we need to, you guys drop your information inside of the Connection Hub and people can reach out as they need. Just drop websites, phone numbers, whatever it is that you need to do. I'm Rebecca Plant. We're going to be coming to you again today live at 2 p.m. On Thursday, again, we have a masterclass on health and wellness. And then next Wednesday, the 1st of April, I will be here in our home studio, which has turned, our office has turned into a bright new home studio, doing our monthly breakfast with retired Army Major Edward Plant, who's going to be talking Adapt or Die Lessons from a War Zone. I'm Rebecca Plant. Thanks for joining us. I will see you again either later today or sometime soon. Please leave all of your questions underneath this video inside the Connection Hub, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Take care. Stay well.
Thanks.
Okay, that live stream has stopped. Thank you, ladies. How was that? Did you feel like you were on television?
Well, there's so much we could talk about. That's the thing, like half an hour. But I think if I'll happy to put together some information and bullet points and keep them in the Connection Hub and give them some advice.
At the meantime,
I think there's still recording.
That's okay. It's just recording our and we'll stop that though now.